Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is Arnis Luks here, and I'd like to welcome my guests from, or at least my guest from Canada, Robert Klinck. Welcome, Robert Klinck.
I think you might have two. It looks as if my brother's back. But in any case, it's good to see you, Arnie.
No worries. Good to
Good to
see
see
you
you.
too.
Yeah.
I'm just going to try and pick up Wally. Excuse me, ladies and gentlemen, as I attempt to drive this. I'm going to, while we're actually doing this, I'll bring you in a sec, Wally. So just be patient. Um, okay. And David Smith. Welcome, David from New South Wales. Welcome.
Good morning, all.
No worries. Pleased to have you, David. Okay, I'm going to cut across to websites. I'm going to do an intro, and hopefully we'll pick up Wally in a sec to introduce him. So the first page I want to bring up is actually an article by Jeffrey Dobbs. Conservatism is not enough. It's a very, very important article because what it shows is that the things that are going on with the social credit movement, the things that are going on with media generally, is that they're actually presenting a dialectical argument. And in particular, I'm going to go to the Epoch Times. Even in the headings, the Epoch Times, Biden and Democrats, Trump and Republicans, that's a dialectical argument. And then, of course, you've got some sort of news column on the right. But they're presenting Republicans against Democrats, Republicans against Democrats. There is no any realistic option apart from Republicans and Democrats. And this is really important because I believe it misses the mark. And I think it misses it. And I believe that's the core of our discussion today. In the Australian, about vaccines, but also about tearing the royal family apart and tearing the institutions of monarchy. Tearing the institution of monarchy asunder, attempting to discredit it to the point where constitutional monarchies throughout the world may be questioning the validity of their actual constitutional structure. Really, really important subject of which we're going to discuss today. Opinions. This one here on the right, coal exits. Now, in Australia, if we're not vulnerable enough with our power generation, we're going to become more vulnerable. They're actually attempting to compromise us, strategically compromise us. This is the policy of our governments, to strategically compromise the people so that they may, as Texas experienced, have a blackout. South Australia experienced it a year or two ago. The entire state is shut down and we're waiting for interconnectors from interstate rather than have our own resources. We've got our coal. We've got more than enough ability to generate our own power. And here we are, we're waiting for the wind to blow, we're waiting for the sun to shine, or South Australia goes black. And of course that's, it's really is ludicrous. It's totally compromises our strategic ability to protect ourselves. Epoch Times, the Gateway Pundit, some things of interest in there, but O'Sullivan is there as our final consideration for today, just to filter in our discussion, Christian Philosophy in the Common Law by O'Sullivan. And he traces, especially around the 12th and 1300s, and then leading into 1400s, 1500s with Henry VIII and Thomas Cromwell, I might add, his right-hand henchman. Thomas Cromwell, who was, I think, the grandfather of Oliver Cromwell, the revolutionary. And very, 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 very important book to read because it places the actual historical development of Christian thinking and what was actually going on in Britain at the time. Now I'm going to stay on that page just while I try and rebuild build Wally up. But what I might do is actually give Robert the floor, and for your thoughts, please, Robert.
Yes, well, that period of history that's being talked about encompasses what is known as Merry England. And that should be a very intriguing designation for people these days because there's not a lot of merriment going on in the world today. It's become a pretty grim place. So you have to wonder what was the foundation for the contentment and the happiness during that period in history. And there was a time when the theologians were influential, but they were always thinking in, or at least the better of them were thinking in terms of conforming to the reality of the universe, which could also be regarded as natural law. And they saw humanity as fitting into that reality. Nowadays, it's just commonplace for people to think that they are outside that reality, that they can reconstruct it themselves and somehow make it functional. We have politicians who are, in effect, claiming to replace God. Not only politicians, but in particular scientists. We're living in a period of domination by mad scientists, I'm afraid. And their science is becoming increasingly dubious because they don't respect natural law. So in this period of history, when things seem to have been we didn't have the technological advantages that we have today, we should be much better off today than they were in a material way. But there was a spiritual strength and a contentment that seemed to have passed from the earth. Now we have a world, is that not actually a world, but we have a Western world that is wearing masks and social distancing. If the Western world could be in contact with the rest of the world, for example, Asia and Africa, they would discover that many of these countries are living perfectly normal lives, not frightened of COVID in any way, not seeing people fall down dead on the streets. They're living normal lives. But it is clear that the West, under the influence of these supposedly godlike politicians and scientists, has been slated for a kind of destruction. And we are we're on a route to lose centuries of progress in every domain, not only theological or philosophical or political or juridical, even material. They're driving us down to a lower level of existence in the material world, even though we are living in a time of such potential abundance that people in previous centuries couldn't even imagine it. If they saw the advantages that we have today, they would really think we are fools, that we are not conveying those advantages to the population. And this, of course, was the purpose of the social credit monetary reforms. It was to recognize the potential of the modern productive system, but to find a way to move its advantages over to the population. And this is the great failure of the economic system that we have at the present time. No matter what progress is made in the industrial arts, the situation of the average man stays basically the same. And the reason for this is that the people who want to plan society, who want to control society, want to have people in positions of dependence so they can be dictated to. Social credit, uniquely among economic or political policies, is designed to free people from that domination of insecurity and dependence on others, particularly the banking system, to provide them with a flow of income. There's no reason why there can't be a flow of income to people in a more or less automatic way when we're living in an automated society.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Robert. That's an excellent opening salvo in regard to the social credit response to the financial economic system with the potential national dividend, which of course is a method of distribution, equitable distribution, the fruit of production, not the actual means of production, but the fruit of production is an inheritance that is there for all. David Smith, your thoughts? I'm quite interested in them. How are you going?
Good, thank you. Um, I'd like to pick up on what Bob was saying and read you, if I'm permitted to read something, from William Cobbett about the history of the Protestant Reformation in England and Scotland. And this event, called the Reformation, he writes, had impoverished and degraded the main body of the people in England and Ireland. The Reformation, the term, had been misapplied, for there was a change, but a change greatly for the worse. That the thing called the Reformation was engendered in lust, brought forth in hypocrisy and perfidy, and cherished and fed by plump devastation and by rivers of innocent English and Irish blood. As a consequence, people were reduced to misery, beggary, nakedness and hunger, all those things which now stare us in the face and stun our ears at every turn, and which the Reformation has given us in exchange for the ease and happiness and harmony and Christian charity enjoyed so abundantly and for so many ages by our Catholic forebears. That's the quote there from William Cobbett and what he saw as what happened over the Reformation. Now, we understand that it also brought a new life to Christianity that was not, but it was a political program to destroy that advancement of Christ's kingdom. And not long after the Reformation, we have the formation of the Bank of England, we have the industrial age and the work sweatshops, the clearances from men and families off their farms, and it's continued to this day. And all this, history still writes the Reformation as being the glorious thing that happened for the advancement of Christianity, and whether you can say for Christ's teaching, I think it fell by the wayside. All this with the assistance of a media that's like a spider's web, encompassing every aspect of people's lives, so that wherever you turn, the same picture is painted, and it's very hard to find the truth and the clarity that social credit and the truth that Christ sought to teach bring to human life.
Beautifully put, David. That is such a beautiful picture. Yeah. Anything else before I cut across?
I think that'll do for the moment.
No worries. No, that's just that's wonderful. The vivid picture of love and development, the potential that's there. As I said to you earlier on, ladies and gentlemen, the Christian Philosophy in the Common Law, that book, it really, really did open up another point of view that I hadn't thought of. And the thing is that in the history of England, they had the canon law courts, if you like, the canon law courts. And then they had the secular law courts. But the judges for the canon law courts would be judging all of the canon law, which we call common law. They would be judging the canon law, and then they would turn in another direction and then judge the if you like, the king's law, the man's law. And so what the acknowledgement of the canon law is that there is a law above man's law. There is a law in nature. There is in the canon, in the warp and woof of what is going on, there are laws that are inviolate. They're natural laws. They're something that is inherent within every situation, and a correct relationship and answer. And of course, that's what the canon lawyers, that's what the canon courts were about. It was about identifying what was canon law and what was common law, what was secular law. Canon law progressed into being called the common law. And that's when we talk about common law rights. It's in the nature of things, that's what we're referring to. Your thoughts, please, Wallace Klinck.
Yes, Arnie, I think that there have been some wonderful things said today, and I must say, I think I agree with everything that has been said. And there's no doubt in my mind that there has been a concerted effort to destroy the Christian ethic for at least 2 millennia. And it has been inserted into our civic institutions, our government institutions, and to corrupt them so that they no longer reflect the policy of the Holy Spirit, which is inherent within the nature of the universe. It is just what is. And there's been a determined effort to corrupt what is. And I think it derives essentially from that terrible sin called pride. These people hate natural law because natural law places a restraint upon their will to power. Their will to power is to control their fellow man. I know Dennis Byrne wrote an essay, and I wasn't quite sure of the importance of it when I first saw it. But he wrote an essay in which he said that we all have a special relationship with God, with our Creator, with the nature of things as they truly are. And anyone who tries to interfere with that relationship that the individual has with that order is committing a major sin, a moral crime. Because what they're doing is they're trying to destroy the lives, the quality of life, the meaning of life for those people, and leave them destitute, standing defenseless and without hope. And I think that that has been done, and I think it is being done. And you mentioned a number of things that are being done, Arnie, with regard to our resources and the family and all of that sort of thing. This is all part, I'm quite confident, of a major breakout in a policy of writing the final demise, creating the final demise of Christian thought, policy, and society, its organic existence within humanity, all in the interest of those who seek power and who would literally usurp the position of God and attempt to control all things. As you can see, the whole nature of this thing is control in the finest detail. And that is Phariseeism. It is pure Phariseeism, control to the last detail of humans' activities, their thoughts, their responses, their reactions, just turning them into literal slaves who have no independence of strength, of morality, of intellect, it's basically to render them defenseless and as slaves, essentially. And I think these people take a great pleasure out of doing that because they are interfering with, they think, destroying, sabotaging the essence of life, real life, in their own interest of control over our lives, and there's been an effort to destroy faith, destroying faith by sabotaging the means that we have to effect or to bring into being control of a desirable kind over our lives on a physical level. I mean, if we can convince people that everything is no good, that our past history is no good, and that we're headed for disaster from the standpoint of resources and so on, there is no basis for faith because there is no evidence of faith. And they're trying to destroy that evidence absolutely. And this may sound like a bit of an extravagant expression of the situation, but I don't think you can come to any other conclusion by the way things are going.
No worries. Thank you for that, Wally. That's a hard-hitting comment. A deliberate plan, if you like, to destroy culture, to destroy civilization. I found that book by O'Sullivan, Christian Philosophy in the Common Law, I found it inspiring. I found it inspiring because the story of Britain, 1300s, 1400s, was one where the greatest minds for that whole nation, were concentrating on canon law. They were concentrating on Christian law, if you like, or the natural law. That's what they were concentrating on. Observing it in nature. They would adjudicate all of the goings-on of people and how to actually come to a conclusion based on what was right, what was equitable. This word equity between man and woman, husband and wife. And of course, the one thing I did read in that book was that marriage itself, marriage was a sacred act. It was a sacred
Absolutely.
act. It was not a secular act. It was a sacred act. It was a sacrament. And so the sacrament was performed in the church. It's not a legal situation as we have today, where one day you're married, the next day you're divorced. It's a sacred act that you actually make vows of which only you can break. Vows are something that only you can break. So you make vows before God, and God sanctifies that marriage. That's the Trinitarian relation, the husband, the wife, and God. That's the Trinitarian relationship. And so it is, or so it was, in the time of Merry England. That Trinitarian relationship was the people, the government, and the church. There was a Trinitarian relationship, and the natural law, the canon law, was insisted upon from the church. It was insisted on from the church. You've got to adhere to the nature of things. This is the, if you like, the witness, the signature of God, that this is the way things work, and we have to abide by that. And beautifully put. But even though you say, well, okay, but we've still got government. Yes, you do need government. You do need some laws. But these natural laws, these, if you like, the canon law or common law, was in the nature of things. And that's why it was a law above man's law. When we see the lockdown in Victoria, and police armed to the hilt, ready to drag pregnant women around and things like that, abusive situations, that's not upholding the law. That's a police state. That's enforcement. That's a military operation. There's no virtue in that whatsoever. None at all. And so those are secular laws, but they're not in the nature of things. In the nature of things, the policeman stands between trouble and the community. They stand between as an upholder of the law. I stand in the name of the law. I uphold it. I am that barrier between wrongdoing and the community. But this, what they're doing is they have completely lost it. They have, in my view, completely lost it. The police have. They have lost their modus, what's it called? Their locus operandi, whatever, their justification in standing. They have lost it because they're not upholding the law. They're essentially enforcing an invasion, something that is anti our own culture, and they're enforcing it, and that's why it's wrong. It is so wrong. You police are good people, but you're confused. You've forgotten it. And this, of course, why are they tearing the royal family apart? Because the royal family, if you like, are only people, but the institution of monarchy is inherent in the Trinitarian relationship in our constitution, and that's why it's so important. The lower house, the upper house, and the monarch or the monarch's representative. That's our institutional representation. And as Henry VIII and Thomas Cromwell did to tear asunder that correct balance in relationship in the community, in the culture of England. They tore it asunder. And so it is today that the media would attempt to tear asunder the correct relationship, that balance, that equilibrium within our constitution, within our culture. So very, very important. We've got to go back to our roots. If we don't look at this and look deeply and hard at this situation, we'll lose sight of it, and we will lose our culture. We will have civilizational collapse. Robert Klinck.
Well, there's no doubt that there is active sabotage of our culture going on. And I think that a primary aspect of this is to infuse people with hubris and narcissism to convince them that they are independent actors in the universe. But this is not obviously the way things work. The universe functions according to discoverable laws. We're in it, and we should be functioning according to discoverable laws as well. This was what Christ came to reveal to us. We were thrashing around or having lost our bearings, and he came and I was going to say reset, but in the context of the Great Reset, maybe I should avoid that term. But he gave us a chance to get a fresh start. This was his revelation. And theological analysis led to the doctrine of Trinitarianism. This was something that it would have been impossible for men to discover, that God is actually triune on their own. It had to come through a form of revelation. And it was blindingly revelatory when people realized it had to be. If God was a God of love, and that was the primary affirmation of Christianity, then there had to be an object of love in there. You can't have love without a recipient, an object of the love. And Jesus was the Son of God, the recipient. And but something connects those two. And what connects those two is the Holy Spirit. So there you had your Trinitarian model for the universe, for the creation of the universe. And people who were thinking in terms of this model came up with a concept of human society that believed in harmony, believed in cooperation, believed in furthering the possibility of people loving each other. This was the whole purpose of the exercise. And then we came into the era of dialectics. Dialectics has only two sides. You've got the thesis and the antithesis. And the synthesis is not, it's not a part of that. The synthesis is an outcome. So all you have with dialectical analysis, which is Marxist, and not only Marxist, it's been promoted by other theoreticians and philosophers in history, but Marx is the one that sort of conquered the modern age. And with dialectics, the only way to have progress is through conflict. So the old concept of harmony and unity and love has been replaced in the minds of so many modern people by this idea of dialectics and change, constant change. Well, we don't necessarily want constant change. If you've got something good going, why in the world would you want to change it? But under the rule of dialectics expressed by Trotsky in his theory of perpetual revolution, that you've got to keep going and going, changing everything all the time. You've got to change families. You've got to change human relations. You've got to change economic arrangements. Everything has to be constantly in change in order for there to be progress. and it is a destructive concept. It has enslaved the world, not only the communist world, but the Western world. There's this constant insistence on the necessity of conflict, and through conflict, progress. But that is a total departure from the concept that governed Western society for centuries, for the period that Arnie described at the beginning of this broadcast.
Thank you so much for that, Robert. It's interesting because I know we've all got our own take on the circumstances and the things that we see, and the fact is that we're actually complementing our perspective, complementing the view from different angles, but still coming to the same conclusion, that we have deviated from truth, from reality. We have actually hamstrung or bound up reality. Your thoughts, please, David Smith.
I'll go back to two men, Tolstoy and Solzhenitsyn, two men who knew what it was to live under a totalitarian government and to suffer for their beliefs. Tolstoy said that government, don't know the exact quote, but government's only legitimate if and where it defends the rights and freedoms of its people. And to pick up on, maybe to further on what Wally said, Christ showed us a new way and freed the people from that Pharisaical power at the time. And that's what the progress of what we know as history has been. For so long, men lived in that freedom, except for infighting among themselves here and there, but they lived free lives otherwise. But that's why today, that since the Reformation, that attack has been consistently against the Christian Trinitarian monarchy and our system of rules and governance that flowed from that. That's where the attack has been and is continuing right to this day.
Thank you, David Smith. That's I think that's profoundly important to recognise, because in your considerations of what should you do, the first thing is to actually understand what's going on, and then on the basis of understanding, how do you actually understand it if you don't actually look back in history of what were the high water marks, what were the best that we ever did, and can we actually not go back to it, go forward to it. Go forward to it. Take all of those learnings, those things that were actually the best of what we've ever done, and build forward from them. Your thoughts, please, Wallace Klinck.
That's right, Arnie. We don't need destroyers coming along and trying to sabotage the whole cultural heritage. We have hopefully learned a few things along the way, and that becomes a foundational building structure that helps us to make further advances in understanding. I've got nothing against constant change, but I think that the change should be in our limited mortal understandings of what really is, and what really is. It's not changeable. It is what is. And so we can enhance our understanding of the nature of what is and our abilities to live within that context and to utilize the forces and principles that are available to us. And I think that, we're supposed to seek truth. None of us can see the whole truth. And it's an eternal thing to seek the truth. But there is, as I've said before, an element which is called love. And I don't think love is something that can be understood I think it is something that you know, something you feel. It is innate within you, and it is simply there. I don't think you can understand it. It's a motivating force. And but it can certainly assist you in having the right attitude to seeking the truth on all other aspects of life. And it's the critical thing, and it's got nothing to do with rationality or thought in terms of reason. It is something that just exists. It's like, the principle of sufficiency in engineering, homeostasis within the study of the functions of the human body, is a balance, harmony. And the people who are promoting revolution don't want harmony. They want violence. They want conflict, because that plays into their hands in their struggle for power over their fellow men. And men being in the men and women, humans. So I think that change, if it is seeking an understanding of God and God's universe, is a marvelous thing. Couldn't think of anything more marvelous. But change for the sake of exercising temporal power and spiritual power over your fellow human being is a devilish thing, an absolutely evil thing, because it is only through being free to think, free to imagine, free to express, that we can advance, that we can move on. But once you get blocked into some kind of a revolutionary pattern, you're basically put into a state of stasis. It's a permanent state of revolution and conflict, which is not likely to achieve anything. You see, the communists believe that conflict is the basis of all progress. I don't think that is true. Questioning is a different thing than conflict. Conflict is setting forces against each other, and it tends to be a destructive thing. So it's not a seeking of truth. It is an assertion of superior power. And that is not a good thing.
Yeah, thank you for that, Wally. You reminded me, I'm going to go straight back to it because I think it's really important. And this is why I found that Leo Tolstoy article, I believe it's called Patriotism and Government. I did a search on it. You may find that text in there. This conflict, this dialectic, in the epoch times, that's what they're promoting. Now, they're a freedom movement. They're promoting Trump and the Republicans, Biden and the Democrats. They're not actually promoting truth. They're promoting confrontation. They're promoting the strongest shall win. So let's become the strongest. And that's not the answer. The answer's not in conflict. The answer is actually in truth. The truth will set you free. That's what it's about. Your thoughts, please, Robert Klinck.
Well, in every political campaign, what do the political campaigners assert? They assert that we will change things. Got to change. Well, isn't that a condemnation of what has gone before? Because it is a recognition of the fact that we don't really progress. All this alleged change, you're just spinning our wheels as far as benefiting the average individual goes. And often it's actually a loss of traction and a backward slide. That seems to be where we're going now with this big plan to reset everything in the world and take away all personal property and make everybody dependent on a minimal stipend from the government in order to subsist, not to exist, not to grow, not to flower, but to subsist. This is the plan that is envisioned for humanity in the future through this great reset idea. Wally said he's all for change. Well, the problem is that practically all the change that we see in the world today is determined by the people who control the licenses to act, the financial system. They create money out of nothing and they put it into the economy. They dole it out on condition that people will follow their instructions, that will do research in lines, predetermined lines. Therefore, we see suddenly all the people are in whatever area of academia are doing research into women's issues. This is what happened with the feminist movement. In no matter what area, literature, even in science, it was all concerned with the areas that were being given grants, were being given finance. So that's the way that society is carried. And it's the same thing with the climate change business. If you want to have a successful career in academia, come up with a proposal for doing some research into science in the climate area that will accord with what the financiers want to promote. And the whole purpose of the climate change propaganda is to create a system of control over the entire world, because climate, like this epidemic, this pandemic, is a world problem, and therefore it provides justifications, rationalizations for installing controls over the entire world. And it suppresses nations, because nations can't deal with the problem by themselves. It's just a gigantic scam, and it is all promoted and directed and researched and financed from this international financial monopoly that we have allowed to run the world. I mean, we've done it for so long, and there doesn't seem to be any perception, even though a lot of people realize the power that these people have. They don't seem to come up with any practical proposals for removing that power from them. It has to be done, or the world is just going to become exhausted by a succession of worse and worse problems until we all just lie down and say, do something, please spare us, we can't take any more.
Yeah, to give up, to actually get to the stage where you love your own chains. I mean, that's it's a denial of your humanity. It's I don't want to think, I don't want to have to do this, I don't want to have to do that, I don't want to actually work out this problem or work it through. It's a denial of the right that you have inherent within you to find expression and to make your own, if you like, Garden of Eden, your little bit of heaven or paradise on earth as in heaven. That's our prayer, on earth as in heaven, to bring about God's kingdom, but also to have our own bit of heaven here. Your thoughts, please, David Smith.
Can I pick up on we come to love our own chains? The new normal today is give me a job. I've got to have a job. All in defiance of everything we can see around us. We do not need to slave like we do. Yes, there's work to be done everywhere, but this age of automation has produced a whole new world. But the new normal is that people are just satisfied if they have a job. Science has become the great god. Science has created nothing. It merely finds things that are and applies the gifts that this earth is endowed with. and applies them. That's the reality of science, and it's only legitimate when it does those things without seeking to impose an agenda like is being done today. Of course, the only science that we're allowed to listen to is that the mainstream media and the powers that be perpetuate. An interesting little thing, lady activist here in Australia, I won't mention names, but it was recently International Women's Day, so she set herself to the task of asking our political lady leaders, I should say woman leaders, they're not all ladies, what is a woman? And would you believe it? None of them would answer her. That is the sad state of unreality that the world has descended to today, that we cannot even define a man and a woman. And I see a great hope in all this, that the ordinary, average, everyday man and woman are growing in revulsion in their minds to what is happening, and it will create a searching for the truth and the right way of doing things, and political leaders who will carry it out and follow what the mass of people really want.
Yeah, that's a beautifully put. Political leaders, and I'm always cautious about political leaders, any type of leader, because my experience with leadership is that if you want to be a true leader, then you've got to be a servant, and you've got you've got to actually resource people into the things that they hope for. I mentioned in last week's On Target the issue of the Murray-Darling Basin, and you can come up with different schemes and different answers, but in the end, what do they want? They want enough water. They want it to be affordable, reliable, and sustainable. And I use that word sustainable in the, if you like, not only in providing sufficient supply at all times, but also sustainable in that the waterways are kept healthy. They're kept in a state of equilibrium, of homeostasis that is sufficient, that the vegetation, the bird life and things like that, there's a legitimate argument in that. I'm not saying there isn't, but at the same time we do need water security. We need enough water for our growers to grow so that we are fed. And if we are trading with overseas, that okay, if we need to trade because we don't have certain things, then that's fine. Either build it so we do have certain things, or trade. And if farming is part of that, your thoughts, please, Wallace Klinck. Okay, while he's locked up, I'm just going to go back to us. We're having a couple of problems with the internet connection today, but generally we've got away with it. We're at the 48-minute mark. What I might do, Robert, is actually call you in and ask you to do a summary and closing comments, please.
Well, we started out talking about the evolution of legal thinking in a Christian society. That thinking has evolved into a society in which there's no shortage of lawyers, but the legal system has become virtually a prison for the entire population. The parliaments have made it their mission to regulate everything under the sun. They pour out orders in council by the tens of thousands, and it gets to the point where everybody could be proven to be at odds with the law. If you're really conscious, you would probably think, I am potentially prosecutable as a criminal because there's so many regulations around, I must be violating some. So the modern legal system, not the one they had in the period of Merry England when they were trying to understand the nature of human relations. But now we have a system of imposition of artificial relations. And so that we are virtually living in a prison of law. And this is being perfected all the time. And now we're standing on the edge of this system of surveillance, what they call in China social credit, to their shame, because they have taken a term with a specific meaning from historical past, and they have imposed a completely opposite meaning upon it with the modern understanding of what social credit means. Social credit in the terms we're discussing it is exactly the opposite of what everybody is reporting and often denouncing as Chinese social credit. But it's actually frightening. The United States has a rate of incarceration 7 times greater than the one we have in Canada. The United States has more prisoners than China does, I think. Certainly a lot more than Russia has. The United States is just an industry of legalism. And although they keep saying that they are defenders of free markets and they love their constitution and so on, they have allowed it to be subverted in the most scandalous way. And their sense of preserving and furthering personal freedom has really been undermined. It's just horrible to see, because the United States started out with an absolutely unsurpassed constitution in legal terms, and it has been subverted by these people who are promoting the dialectical interpretation of human progress, human advancement. And we've got to get back to a different way of thinking. I think that the Trinitarianism, if it was recognized as an alternative way of thinking, might awaken a lot of people to a better, more harmonious and satisfying way of thinking. This dialectics, which you just pointed out, Arnie, on this article with Biden and Trump, it's just being encouraged everywhere by the media. It's something that is obviously consciously promoted, because it is a way of breaking down society, putting different groups at odds with each other, and assuming that if they fight it out, something good is going to come of it. But that is a delusion. We need a different way of thinking, and the way of thinking that incorporates Christian love is the way to go.
Thank you for that, Robert. That's beautifully put. I know that in Eric Butler, he wrote a booklet called Releasing Reality, and he said three things that have not been, thought to have been tried, but they never were. One was, of course, was Christianity itself. One was democracy, and there was a third which escapes me at the moment. But the point of it is that in those things we think, oh, we're democratic because we have a vote. In actual fact, the votes are manipulated like mad. You've got America in a state of siege, the Capitol under barbed wire, to keep the people out because they know a coup has taken place, the election was a fraud. And then, of course, you've got the direct attacks on the integrity of the monarchy. And this is because there are still constitutional monarchies out there. And these constitutional monarchies limit the power of government. And there's a book by Justice Evatt called The King and His Dominion Governors. The King and His Dominion Governors. It's a very, very important point, because it shows you in this Trinitarian model of government of how at the critical times the Governor-General position has been able to actually restore order in the Parliament when you've had the Parliament attempting to circumvent the power. And of course, Britain, with the House of Lords, does not have the power to withhold finance, so the Commons is actually superior as Commons. So really they only have one house in Britain. It's been undone. It's been undone in at least the last 100 years, but it goes back 500 years to Henry VIII. It goes back. This was where the significant error was made. It was the separation of the Trinity, of God, or the Church if you like, of government and the people. That Trinity was broken because Henry placed the crown on his head as king and also pope, and that was the problem. King and pope in one person. That was the serious problem. Your thoughts and closing comments, please, David Smith.
I'll just say Christ taught us very plainly the Sabbath was made for man and not man for the Sabbath. And the other quote there is, render to Caesar what is Caesar's and to God what is God's. We've gone so far away from that now that government has taken the place of God in our state. And until we, along with Tolstoy, acknowledge that government only legitimate if it defends and looks after its people, then, well, things don't look good if we don't regain that.
Yeah. Thank you, David. That's beautifully put. It's actually a challenge for this age. Don't think it's not. And of course, part of the deconstruction of our culture is to disarm us. It's to actually separate us, and that's why we've got the infiltration of the church by the pedophiles. That's deliberate. That's deliberate to discredit the church and the authority that it should have. So they've actually deliberately gone in there and become those people and to destroy the church, the credibility. But the truths are there. The fact is that the encyclicals are there. This work by O'Sullivan is there. If you go looking for it, it is there. And those truths are what sets you free. The truth shall set you free. How beautifully put, the Lords of our the words of our Lord. When we take them as written, we take them seriously, and we look for the deeper meaning that is always there. It is always there, the profundity that's in the words of Christ. Thank you so much, gentlemen, and it's unfortunate Wally's dropped out, but it's certainly been a profound forum. Thank you so much for today.
Thank you, Arnie.
Thank you, Arnie.
All right, cheers.